E-commerce students, today we're going to be taking a dive into social, mobile, and local marketing. We're essentially going to be taking some of the bigger concepts we were talking about e-commerce marketing and taking them down and defining them at the local or regional level, because that's where we're headed, especially with things like mobile commerce. So what are our objectives here? Our objectives are to really explore the interaction between social media and local marketing, how mobile is transforming that, and how it's all kind of coalescing around the mobile platform. In reality, when we think about local e-commerce, it's really driven by mobile devices. We're also going to be talking a good bit, again, about things like geofencing and local marketing based on location-based services. So some context. We start talking about geofencing. Again, as we mentioned in the previous chapter, what you see on the screen, by the way, are examples of geofences. We are carrying our mobile devices with us just about everywhere we go at this point in time. And the original concept behind mobile e-commerce was, hey, you can buy stuff from Amazon anywhere. And that is true. But we're also seeing that because these devices go everywhere with us, they're kind of our concierge or our guide to the bigger world of e-commerce, even in our local areas, or when we are out in an event, or we're going to a concert or a ball game. So that's really the context of how this stuff is becoming local. What started off as global or national is now going local. So let's talk about this. When we start talking about the concepts, the two main kinds of verbs that we want here is conversation and engagement. So conversing and engaging. Conversation simply means that people are talking about your product. In the old days, prior to e-commerce, this might have even been offline conversations. Engagement means we're actually talking and engaging with our customers, with the people we want to sell to and with whom we want to co-create. And that all this stuff is changing simply because of the way we're using the internet. And again, this has been largely changed and largely pushed by the whole smartphone movement. The very fact that most of us are carrying small computers around with us in our pockets. It's getting blurrier all the time, the lines between traditional e-commerce and things like social networking. And again, they're all based around the idea of what we're carrying with us at all times. So if we look at the growth here, again, our text has relatively conservative numbers here. Mobile e-commerce in general is about $92 billion in the last 2 years. That's an average. But we get down to social. Social is still not hitting its total peak, $38 billion. Local e-commerce, $59 billion. Where are we putting the money now in terms of marketing? The idea of really tracking people in their local communities. Where are you going every day? What are you doing? What are your activities? Because our smartphones can tell us all of these things. And that's really why the idea of local, mobile, and location-based services are all coming together on, you guessed it, our smartphones. We start talking about social marketing. Again, one of the key concepts to remember is it's not necessarily about hard selling. It's about engagement. It's about getting people to talk about our products and services and talk with us. And we start talking about conversions. Conversions simply mean we're getting somebody to go from being a fan to maybe a customer and getting people talking about our product or service. If you get a product launch, for example, I love talking about cars. The F-150, when the new F-150 or a new Mustang comes out, that's not just a marketing campaign, it's a social event for people online to see what the new vehicle is going to look like, because there are so many fans who engage with those products and those brands at a level that goes beyond just ownership. There's an identity associated with them. So in terms of the big players, we have got the brands you're seeing up here, particularly Facebook/Meta, Twitter, and Instagram, which is part of Meta at this point. The largest social networks get the bulk of the users. And so even in today's world, 2023 and beyond, Facebook is still the biggest player, especially when you count Instagram, but that varies by demographic. In terms of total visitors versus engagement, the demographic or the metric we're more concerned with these days is how our key constituents are actually engaging and staying involved. If you've got a mobile app where people are using for multiple hours per day, for example, that might be a lot more powerful than just having general engagement, general visitors, for example. And then we get into what we refer to as dark social, and that simply means that we're engaging on social media, but we're also continuing to talk about it when we're not connected. And that's where we play, again, into local or mobile local e-commerce. Just for your information, and these are from Search Engine Journal that actually classifies YouTube as a social media site. I don't know if I agree with some of their designations, but if we look at this, essentially we're talking the biggest player is still Facebook, followed by Instagram, part of the same company. If you look at this, we've got somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 billion users, and some of those are duplicate because people have both accounts. And we go on down, TikTok's up to 1 billion at this point, surpassing Snapchat. They're still big players. We think about, for example, companies like Pinterest. Maybe we don't talk about as much anymore. They still have significant user bases. And the funny thing is, we look at total number of users. We've got Twitter not cracking the top 5, but has an outsized influence based on the people and the influencers who are using it. So the social marketing process, it goes in a pretty linear process. The first is getting people to like your page. That's acquisition. Then we get into actually interacting with the brand. That's engagement. Amplification means we've got something that's worthy of repeated interactions. And finally, we build communities. Maybe you've got a Facebook group, for example, where you're following somebody's Instagram page, and that hopefully will lead us to strength in terms of sales. So a basic marketing campaign, when you get into these campaigns, between networks or platforms, they may look pretty similar. So we're not going to spend a lot of time really differentiating, because if you were doing honest to goodness social media marketing, you'd be leveraging some of the advantages. I will say that platforms like Facebook have very powerful analytics behind them and people who are doing marketing over Facebook. And by the way, Facebook's got a very powerful presence for local e-commerce in the form of marketplace that's still appealing to the younger demographic as well. We've got a lot of potential here. So basic Facebook marketing, we've got our news feed and our profile. The news feed is simply what you're seeing every day come up in your feed. And some of that is news, actual news. Some of it's marketing. Our timeline is how we share things. And over the last couple of years, Facebook has really played up the idea that they have a search engine, very similar to Google, so you can quickly find content. Facebook, as it turns out, is a treasure trove of data for people who know how to use it, as we've seen in good and bad ways. Particularly look at things like the Cambridge Analytica scandal from a few years ago, when Facebook was selling off an awful lot of information without user consent. And it's designed, these platforms, Facebook, Instagram, all of them are designed to get us to want to share information, to get us to share data, and to connect with more people. So things that work really well. Some of the stuff we take for granted these days, but the like button is Facebook's contribution to the greater social media world. The idea now that we can do multiple types of likes, we can do hearts, we can do dislikes, for example, all of these things. And again, we've got individual brand pages, we've got ways to share things. Facebook Live was transformational too, in the fact that brands all of a sudden were using that as a way to engage live with people in a platform they didn't even have to maintain. And again, all of these other things, whether you're watching things together, which became very popular during the pandemic, to watch a video or a movie together, or using Messenger, we're creating big data. And for those people who are paying to have access to Facebook, they've got pretty accurate profiles of the people who are regular users of Facebook. And in terms of a typical campaign, the first is to build your page and to get people to like it. So we're getting people to leave feedback and to join in. That builds into communities. You may even get into fan pages for your brands. Then you're using other tools such as video and other interactive media to get people to engage, or maybe even doing giveaways. Doing display ads, so they're showing up in people's timelines, for example. And again, trying to get people to like or interact or give feedback on posts. That's what it's all about. How do we measure how successful a Facebook advertising campaign? First is, are you actually getting people to like your page? That just means, what are your general impressions? Conversions. When we talk about conversion rate, a conversion can mean anything. Did we convert somebody from a casual user to a regular user? Did we convert somebody for sales, for example? What's your conversion rate in terms of whatever metric you're setting out? We want to get more people interacting regularly. Amplification means people are sharing, and content isn't limited simply by one person liking something. They're sharing it with their friends and building communities to keep on talking about it. And finally, what we ultimately want to get out of this is sales. If we look at some of the ways we can track this stuff, again, Facebook's got a very powerful analytics suite that you can see what kinds of users you're getting. I'll give you a great example. When I'm not teaching, I'm part of a regional rock and roll band. And we know, for example, based on the people who've liked our page, that we have a lot in common with our fans and the people who like the music of Led Zeppelin, for example. So we know that we can target people with specific profiles, and Facebook Analytics will let you do all of those things. Many people who are doing social media management for a company use something like Hootsuite, for example, which allows you to manage and keep multiple social media platforms consistent. And other companies such as Google Analytics can also be used in tandem with things like Facebook Analytics and Web Trends as well. So again, some differential kinds of approaches when we get into companies like Twitter, for example. And again, Twitter stats here are interesting because they have more international users than they have in terms of in-country users. And the textbook statistics may be different than what I was presenting you as current events. But again, the biggest thing about Twitter, even though the character limits have been increased, it's meant to be short. Twitter is meant not necessarily to give you inherently rich content, but to point you to rich content. And that's the point of the original 140 character limit, was that information had to be presented very quickly. It gets interesting though. In terms of Twitter, we have what's referred to as promoted tweets, and that means people can pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to make sure their tweets show up in everybody's Twitter feed, for example. And the same with all of these other aspects. If we're paying for video or we're amplifying a post, we can pay for all of these things. Twitter really was the first social network to really leverage mobile, and the fact it was built around short bursts of information and pointing people to other kinds of web content. And again, the biggest difference between Twitter and Facebook simply is the nature of the content and sometimes the user base. We get into a Twitter user base tends to be more young and tends to swing male, where Facebook tends to swing female in terms of overall users. And again, businesses are using this as ways to steer business back to their main sites. How do we measure results? Again, very similar to Facebook. Are people engaging? Are they buying stuff? And Twitter has their own analytics suite. I don't mean to make light of any of this stuff, but it's something that we cover in a sort of superficial manner. Because unless you're using these analytics every day, some of the things we're talking about may be a little meaningless to you. In terms of Pinterest, I know that we don't necessarily talk about this in a top 5 category when we're talking about Snapchat, Twitter, and Facebook and Instagram, but Pinterest really was one of the first social networks to emphasize visuals and the idea of them being virtual pin boards. It was an ideal social network for selling things because of visuals. It was also one of the first social networks where advertisers were masquerading as users to get people to engage with content. Still has a very strong user base, and again, disproportionately swings female, disproportionately biased to things like fashion and design. And a campaign doesn't really look much different other than the terminology. You can pay for promoted pins. You can make sure that if you're paying for content, it shows up in other people's feeds, for example, or if they like and engage with your pin, it's going to be shared on their Pinterest page as well. And we've got advertising masquerading as non-commercial content, for example. And again, all of this stuff ultimately is intended to draw traffic back to stores where we can sell people things. And Pinterest is ideal in that regard. So again, what would you do? You create a brand page. You would be using photos to draw people to active links where they can actually buy things. And again, it's very common. Pinterest was one of the first platforms to really leverage this capability to interact with other social networks so that you're sharing similar content, maybe single pictures rather than entire boards, with your Facebook and Twitter presences as well. And again, the whole process was built around getting people to engage with products and sell. And again, one of the first visual social networks. So Instagram is a very similar idea that you can promote, that you can have sponsored Instagram posts, that you essentially can get people to look at your visuals and want to buy your products. But like Facebook, the ability to purchase things now has been built in with things like buy buttons. And one thing we're seeing in 2023 and beyond, thanks largely to the influence of Snapchat, that Instagram is trying to bias itself more toward video and video ads, for example, more interactive styles of content based on things like their stories feature, for example. Snapchat, again, one of the interesting things about Snapchat is many people at this point in time, particularly people who trend younger, are using this not just as a social network, but as a kind of a supplant to their typical texting behavior and interactive communications with others. And again, by using things like geofilters and putting your branding on, you're tying in things like geofencing and creating kind of a buzz or an event around things like geofilters. Again, what do we mean? If you've not heard of geofilters, for example, if I were at St. Francis University, I could purchase a geofilter so that you were sending if you're sending a snap from our location, you would have a frame that says St. Francis University, and companies are doing that too, and live events. So we've got essentially augmented reality type experiences, and social networks are a part of that. TikTok, again, owing to the influence of video, TikTok has again become a very popular medium, particularly for influencers, to be able to review products. So in some ways, I'd think that TikTok is a shorter kind of spiritual successor to YouTube, and one that is geared toward the younger generation. Again, because of things like short videos, influencers really using it to promote products. Now, there are some ethical concerns here as well, simply because it's getting harder and harder to tell what is and what is not sponsored content, but it's very rapid fire. It's viral in nature. LinkedIn, owned by Microsoft, by the way, maybe the least sexy of all of these kinds of formats, the least exciting, but the one that's the most business central, and it's the one where if you're getting into things like business to business e-commerce, this is a great place for it to happen. For example, LinkedIn also, by the way, has a revenue model where they do a paid subscription model so that people who make extensive professional use of LinkedIn can use it to have direct messaging or contact people who are not their connections. I can speak to this personally. When I was doing my doctoral research, I started a professional membership, and it's really helped me out well. It's been worth the price to be able to have instant access to professionals who don't accept messages from people not in their network. It's a great way to build a network as well. So what are some of the downsides? The good sides about social media is people are talking about you, that you have an opportunity to reach different generations, but you're also giving up a certain amount of control. And I think companies sometimes have this idea, falsely, that when they get involved in social media, once you create a page and let some content out there, that's the end of the story, when in reality, it becomes something that's very difficult to manage, very difficult to maintain, and a lot of companies sometimes tend to under budget for what they're going to need to be able to handle. And what I mean by that is as follows. A major convenience store chain in our region, who shall remain nameless, uses social media extensively, and because they do, and because it is such an important part of their overall strategy, they have 4 full-time individuals whose entire job it is to monitor their campaigns, to monitor their social media. Why? Because people say bad things on social media. People may be disparaging of your brand. People may not always have good things to say about you. And once a bad comment goes viral, it can be very difficult to get that back under control. In addition, some other things that can happen is essentially people start resharing content. You lose control very quickly of your message. And ultimately, if you're not responding constantly, your users, your constituents, can have more control over your message than you do. So it can lead to inaccurate depictions of your brand. It can lead to hurt feelings. It can lead to bad depictions of your products or service. The flip side is if you put out a television ad, what you put on the air and the airtime you paid for is what your audience will receive. You're giving up that control when you take it online. So things to think about in terms of key terms that we want to know about here. Bounce rate simple means people are coming to your page. How many people are hitting you? Are they checking you out for the first time? Conversion rate is the more important metric, generally speaking. Why is that? Because conversion rate can mean, are our audiences doing what we want them to do? Are we converting users into fans? Are we converting visits into sales? A conversion rate can mean whatever you want it to mean, and what's important to your company is going to be very specific to you. So is it a purchase? Is it somebody giving you their information? Is it them actually calling you? Is it getting a subscription to your email? You set what the conversion rate is and determine what ultimately is the success. So in terms of mobile marketing, again, one of the things that's challenging here simply is the amount of content. And right now, most people are making purchases over smartphones. These stats are a little old. If we go to 2022 statistics, for example, about 60% of the population is making purchases on smartphones. It's no longer something new or innovative. It's just something we do. One of the challenges are, however, is getting people to find your site. The challenges are, too, at this point. So many people are using mobile apps for their favorite places to buy things. They're not discovering new vendors. They're not discovering new suppliers. And so this can be very challenging to stick out in a world where major retailers have apps at this point. I don't need to read the stats, dude. We know that, for example, that we're overtaking. The predictions were in 2023. And we'll see how those stats work out this year, that mobile would overtake desktop because we're living in what's being referred to as the post-PC, personal computer era, and it may come to pass. The thing that we've learned, too, when the first smartphone came out, the BlackBerry, by most people's estimation, although there were others, the original smartphones that came out were used mainly for business. As it turns out, we're using smartphones more of the time for entertainment than just about anything else. And so most of the time that we're using our smartphones, we're actually at home. So again, who knew that the smartphone would ultimately be driving more regional or local e-commerce or even search out of the home? And we're usually using it when we are home. It also is being used very frequently for things like social networks. And we are using them more for entertainment and interacting with others than just about anything else. So there's lots of room to grow. So in terms of mobile use in general, this is a statistic that should be a little sobering for people who are trying to start new brands. And that is, we're using apps more than anything. What that says to you, if you're trying to break into an established retail market, I'll use, for example, the everything market, the supermarket to the world like the Amazons and Alibabas, it's very hard to get people to check out a new site when most of the time we're using our apps for our interactions. So how do you break into that when, generally speaking, 10% of the public is using their mobile browser for this kind of purpose? And again, if you are coming out with a new e-commerce application, you better have an app pretty quickly. So yes, it's the cheapest and easiest way to simply allow people to go onto a mobile interface. It's easy for you, but it's not going to drive long-term interaction. And so most people, it's really interesting. Where most people don't go past the first page or two of Google search, I think if we look at most stats too, most people are probably not using many of the apps past what's on the front page of their phone. So very few of us at this point in time, if we're watching television, aren't also doing something else. And that means we're always engaged in more than one screen. People who are watching TV are also on their phones. People, unfortunately, on their phones sometimes are also driving, but we're using multiple screens at once. What does this send in terms of a message? That means that your marketing campaigns got to be consistent and got to be geared across platforms as well. So you got to have a multi-point marketing plan. Some of the other things to think about. Why is mobile so powerful? Well, my question for you, what's the last thing that you see before you go to bed and the first thing you see in the morning? What goes with you in your car on your way to work or school? What is with you literally every moment of your day? And yeah, it's our smartphones. We use them for our calendars. We use them to stay in touch with our friends. We use them literally for everything. And at the same time, we're using a lot of subscription-based services that are gathering a lot of information on us. Our phones... Gosh, help me on this one. Go everywhere from the bedroom to the bathroom with us. They probably know more about us than just any other thing that surrounds us, maybe even living people. And again, all of this information, all of these things we're using becomes intuitive because they are touchscreen capable and they are geared to our whims. So in terms of getting into mobile marketing, search ads work really well because if we see what people are looking for online and gathering other information, we can put display ads into your email. We can put them into your browsing. We can put them into your YouTube. And again, you're absolutely getting ads on SMS these days simply because all of this stuff is based on our clickstream behavior. And again, when we get into lead generation, you wonder why you get so many political ads for whatever party that you belong to or whatever your belief system is. It's because we've given up an awful lot of information. So we've become leads even for politicians at this point in time. And social networks themselves, there's a continuity. This really started with companies like Facebook. You're using something on a desktop, and then you're using it on your phone, and your membership carries over, your Gmail carries over, your Instagram carries over, your social network of your choice is in both places, so we're gathering more information all the time. If we look at total spending on ads, for example, video is growing quickly, and it's just going to get bigger and bigger all the time because fewer people want to read things. And so we're going to see most likely the quickest growth of all of these types of advertising. Although search is still the biggest financially, the growth is going to be in video. In terms of mobile marketing, you need to have a website that scales, but ultimately we're probably going to be pushing people to an app. The mobile website should also be pushing you to the brand pages if you got them with Facebook, Twitter, or any social network. And the ad campaigns, again, need to look good. What's on a desktop needs to look good also on mobile as well. And the more that you make it interactive, the more we get actual engagement. That's the goal in mobile marketing, again, because our devices go everywhere with us, and we're going to be interacting in real time, sometimes at a local level as well. And how do you measure the effectiveness of a brand campaign? Unique visitors are good, but what you're ultimately looking for are how much time people are spending on the page, how much they're engaging, and again, your conversion rate. Are you converting this stuff to sales? We mentioned about geofencing. This goes part and parcel with the amount of information we're giving up on our smartphones that are all GPS enabled and tracking our locations. I mean, those of us who drive to work every day by default, we get a report from our phone how long it's going to take us to get to work. Why does my phone care what route that I take to work? Because what restaurants am I passing? What shopping malls am I passing? What gas stations am I passing? And this gives us an idea of how we can promote places for people to shop. So local becomes mobile as well. Again, we saw this growth really take off thanks to Google Maps. Now, Google Maps didn't exist the way we know it now before 2005 when the smartphone got very popular. Again, 2007, the first iPhone was not the first smartphone, but it was the first one that really gained mass popularity and the first one that really captured the popular attention of the population. And all of a sudden, we discovered that things like GPS are accessible right on our phones. And that enabled not just us to find where we wanted to go, and it also enabled companies like Google to better target us based on our interests, based on our location, and based on what we might be likely to encounter on the way. So again, if we look again at the way we're spending money at this point in time, local-based mobile marketing is a small part of the overall online marketing budget, but it's growing fast as well. So mobile approaches to advertising and video ads are growing very quickly because people don't want to read and because we also are taking our phones everywhere. So mobile marketing is local marketing inherently. So what are some of the platforms? Obviously, Google, not so much just with search, but with all the great free, quote-unquote, apps that they give us to use. And there's a reason, for example, why Google gives you these things for free, because we're giving in exchange for information. We're giving up more information sometimes with Google Maps even than we are with Gmail. And again, if you get into any social network, our text lists Facebook, but any social network, Verizon. Verizon is constantly, along with other cell providers, tracking your information, where you're going on your phone, and using that to be able to better target with advertising. And again, I think I could replace this slide and just say anything that's on your phone is making some use of local and mobile types of marketing. So in terms of how we do local marketing, one is just called geo-aware. That means we know where you're at on the planet. Proximity means, are you close to us? What we're seeing right now, too, if we're getting into, it's called the Frigital era, and it's spelled like Frigital combined with digital, that we're seeing if you're in close proximity to a store, for example, because of things like built-in IR codes now and built-in wireless transmitters that are in fabrics and everything else. Let me explain this. If you walk into a store, for example, and the mobile app says, hey, that shirt you're wearing, I can tell that you bought it here. An ad might come up on your mobile app to say this pair of pants that we sell right here goes really well with the shirt that you bought. I know you bought the shirt because I can see your history on your mobile app, and I can see you're wearing the shirt right now because it's got a built-in RFID tag. And so again, geo-aware, where are you on the planet? What's close to you? What matches your interest based on your search history? And proximity, what are you close to right now? And again, all of our phones have built-in GPS, but they're able to triangulate using things like cell and Wi-Fi as well, which can give you a pretty good idea within a few feet of where somebody actually is. Why is local so attractive? Well, because sometimes we need things right now. Because if we are using a smartphone to search, it means we might be interested in buying something really quickly. If we're in a store comparison shopping, for example, if we want something to eat, we want it now. And so there are types of e-commerce that the best and most convenient ways to approach this are what we can get right now. So again, all of these things, when we get into how we're giving up our location, we've covered most of them. The bottom line is that your phone is gathering data on where you go and what you're doing, even to the point where, for example, some applications will track if your phone is upright or horizontal. What might that indicate? Are you laying on the couch? Are you doing this during your leisure time? It comes down to context as well. There's going to be a video this week that gives you some more of the specifics on how smartphones track us. I think it's something that's worth exploring to know just how much of our data is being compromised potentially from a personal standpoint and from a marketing standpoint, how we can better reach the clients and customers we want to reach. A location-based campaign has some pretty unique considerations, however. A lot of the location-based stuff, if I were giving you the biggest bit of context, it tends to be stuff that's more time-sensitive too. It's things that people want now. It's based on where are you and what are your needs in this second. If you're looking for a place to eat, you're looking for gas for your car, and again, are you in a place where you are in an opportunity to go to multiple competing locations? Who are you, where are you, and why are you there? If I am between the ages of 21 and 30, and I'm on a river walk where there's lots of bars and restaurants, and it's Friday at 9 p.m., there's a good chance I might be looking to have some social good times. And that would be an example of something that is location-based, it's demographic-based, based on what the information I've given up my apps and my behavior, and also tied to context of where we are and when. How do you measure the marketing results for this sort of stuff? Essentially, when you try a variable, you lower the price, you give people options immediately. Are they responding or not? Is your advertising campaign appealing to them? Did it match up with the demographic? Did they share it on their social network? Did they engage with others? Did they ultimately convert and make a purchase? This is a really, really superficial 30,000-foot view on how we are getting into things like location-based marketing and the impact of mobile. I hope you enjoyed it. I look forward to speaking.